Short is the story, long is the life.
Wukong's Archive presents China Urban Legends EP16. The Unit 731 Basement of Harbin.
It was April 2019. Xiao Liu said he picked up a group that day, 7 people, flying in from Dalian. The itinerary said a 3-day in-depth tour of Harbin, Central Street, St. Sophia Cathedral, Sun Island, the Ice and Snow World, all the usual spots. No problem there. The thing was, when he went to pick them up at the airport, he noticed that among the 7 people was an elderly man, around 70-something. His face was thin, he wore a pair of silver-rimmed glasses and a grey old trench coat, and from start to finish, he didn't say a single word.
The others were all middle-aged, 3 men and 3 women, looking like a family trip. Their leader, a middle-aged man, stepped forward and shook Xiao Liu's hand. His Mandarin was very standard. He introduced himself as Mr. Sato, saying they were tourists from Japan. Xiao Liu was taken aback. He'd been a tour guide for 7 or 8 years and had led Japanese tour groups before, but those were always specialized groups arranged through travel agencies, not stray tourists like this. And the surname Sato, in a place like Harbin, was a bit sensitive, no matter how you looked at it. But he didn't say anything. He just went through the motions. The first day went perfectly normally. Central Street was packed with people. The Sato family took lots of photos in front of St. Sophia Cathedral. The old man stayed at the back of the group the whole time, barely speaking, barely taking photos, just staring at those Russian-style buildings with an expression that was hard to describe, not happy, not unhappy. It was more like something deep and unnameable. The morning of the second day they went to Sun Island, also normal. At noon they ate fish by the Songhua River. Mr. Sato chatted with Xiao Liu, asking a lot about Harbin's history, when the Russians came, which year the Chinese Eastern Railway was built, what it was like when the Japanese occupied Harbin.
Xiao Liu said that as a tour guide, he'd done his history homework, so he told them what he knew. As he was talking, he noticed that at some point the old man had drifted over too, sitting at the table next to them, holding a cup of tea, listening silently.
On the 3rd day, the last day, Mr. Sato said, "Guide Liu, there's a place we'd like to go."
Xiao Liu asked, "Where?"
"Pingfang," Mr. Sato said. "The Unit 731 site."
Xiao Liu said his heart sank. He said, "Brother, you understand, right? A Japanese family tour group, on the last day, specifically asking to go to the Unit 731 site. You can't help but wonder."
But they were his guests. He had no reason to refuse. He said, "All right, let's go." Part 2, Pingfang. From downtown Harbin to Pingfang district, it's about a 40-minute drive.
Xiao Liu said the weather was bad that day. April in Harbin is still cold. The sky was overcast, and there were hardly any cars on the road. The 7 members of the Sato family sat in the minivan, silent the whole way. The old man sat in the back row by the window, staring outside the whole time, from the city to the suburbs, from apartment buildings to open fields. Xiao Liu said, "You know, the Unit 731 site today doesn't actually look as scary as you'd imagine. A large memorial hall has been built there, new buildings, a plaza, lawns. The original ruins are just one part of it. Lots of out-of-town tourists come to Harbin and go there, treat it as a patriotic education base. So I'd led tours there before. I didn't think it was anything special.
But this time was different. At the gate, the car stopped. Everyone got out one by one. The old man was the last one off. Xiao Liu said he stood there at the car door, one hand on the door frame, staring at the gray building complex in the distance. He stood there for a long time, about a minute, completely motionless. His son, Mr. Sato, walked over and tried to help him, but the old man waved him off and slowly got down by himself.
Xiao Liu said he was standing behind the old man at that moment, and for some reason, he felt that the old man's back looked especially. He searched for the word but couldn't find it. Later, one word came to him: confession.
Not repentance. Not grief. Confession. Like a convicted felon being brought back to the scene of the crime to point things out, that kind of silent, inescapable admission. Inside, the memorial hall was huge. There were exhibition halls, models, photographs, and text descriptions. Xiao Liu said after they entered the exhibition halls, there were several rooms showing photos and reconstructed scenes of the human experiments Unit 731 conducted, frostbite experiments, live vivisections, plague cultivation. He'd seen those things many times before, but every time he still felt his stomach churn.
The other members of the Sato family watched in silence as well. The women kept dabbing at their eyes with tissues. The men stood in front of the display cases, staring at the documents and photographs, not speaking for long stretches.
But the old man, Xiao Liu said, never once looked at the things inside the display cases. The whole time, he was looking at the walls. The cracks in the walls. The seams in the floor. The pipes on the ceiling. His expression wasn't sadness or fear. It was an intensely focused, almost morbid recognition. Xiao Liu said, watching from the side, he felt the old man didn't seem like he was visiting a memorial hall. It seemed like he was looking for something.
Part 3, The Basement. About halfway through the tour, something happened. One area of the memorial hall was the preserved former headquarters building of Unit 731, that two-story gray structure. When the Sato family reached a corridor on the east side of the building, the old man suddenly stopped. He stopped in front of a white wall in the middle of the corridor and reached out to touch the paint on it. Then he turned and said something in Japanese to his son.
Xiao Liu said his Japanese wasn't great, but he understood the word kaika downstairs.
His son's face changed. He walked over and spoke quietly to the old man in a tone that sounded like he was trying to dissuade him. But the old man insisted. His voice wasn't loud, but his attitude was firm. He pointed at the wall, repeating something over and over.
Mr. Sato had no choice. He came over to Xiao Liu and said, "Guide Liu. My father says there are stairs under this wall."
Xiao Liu said, "Huh?"
Mr. Sato said, "This building originally had a basement, a deep one at least 3 levels. My father says that directly below where this corridor is now, there should be an entrance leading down to the second basement level. Someone bricked it up and plastered over it, so it looks like a solid white wall."
Xiao Liu was stunned. He looked at the wall, a white wall, identical to every other wall in the corridor, completely indistinguishable. He looked at the floor, concrete, no seams or grooves either. He said, "How does your father know?"
Mr. Sato was silent for a moment. Then he said, "My father worked in this building back then."
Xiao Liu said a chill ran down his spine. It was an overcast day. The light in the corridor was a cold white, shining on the white walls, making them seem especially pale. He stood in that corridor, looked left and right, no other tourists. Just the 7 of them. It was very quiet.
He asked, "What did the old gentleman do here?" Mr. Sato didn't answer directly. He just said, "This is the first time my father has come back since he left."
Xiao Liu said he didn't press further. After so many years as a tour guide, he knew there were some questions you couldn't ask. If a guest didn't want to talk about something, there was no point pushing.
Part 4, Old Son. The night after they returned from the Unit 731 site, Xiao Liu dropped the Sato family off at their hotel, then got back in his car. Instead of going home, he drove back to Pingfang. He said he didn't know why he went back. Maybe it was the image of the old man standing in front of that white wall, touching it, that kept turning over and over in his mind. He said he'd led tours past that wall hundreds of times before, and no one had ever paid it any attention. But that old man touched it. He ran his hands over it twice, from left to right, from top to bottom, like he was looking for an invisible seam.
Xiao Liu said he knew someone who had lived near the Unit 731 site for most of his life.
The man's surname was Sunday. Everyone called him Old Sunday. He was 73 years old, living on Xinchengli Street in Pingfang, less than a 20-minute walk from the site. Old Sun had grown up in Pingfang. His father had come from Shandong during the Chuang-Guangdong migration before liberation and settled in Pingfang. Old Sun said when he was a kid, back in the 50s, that place wasn't called a memorial hall yet. People called it the Japanese building. Back then, all the neighborhood kids knew you weren't supposed to go there. The adults said there were ghosts in that building. Not because of superstition, but because people had actually had incidents in there.
Old Sun said in 1953, 2 teenagers climbed over the wall to play inside and spent an afternoon in the building. After they came back, one of them developed a high fever and started talking nonsense, said there were skeletons walking around inside, skeletons in Japanese military uniforms, clattering down the corridors. The other kid was fine, but from then on, he refused to go anywhere near the east side of Pingfang.
Later, both families went to the police station to report it. The station took it seriously and sent people to check the building. They didn't find anything. But to put the residents' minds at ease, they sealed off the main building, put a big lock on the door, and wouldn't let anyone in. Many years later, sometime in the mid to late 60s, someone went in again. This time it was government people, apparently looking for something in the building. Old Sun said he didn't know exactly which department, but he remembered that day 3 military jeeps showed up with 7 or 8 people in uniforms that weren't military. They stayed in the building all day and didn't leave until dark. When they left, the trunk of every jeep was packed full, covered with tarps, so you couldn't see what it was. Later still, in the 80s, the government began cleaning up and restoring the site, preparing to build the memorial hall. When the construction crew came in, some strange things happened. Part 5. What the construction crew saw.
Old Sun said in the fall of 1982, when the construction crew came in to clear the headquarters building, something happened that no one has been able to explain to this day.
There was a mason on the crew, a man surnamed Zhao. He was in his 40s back then, an old hand who'd done every kind of work. He was assigned to clear the floor of the East Corridor, the area near what's now that white wall. Master Zhao said the corridor floor was concrete, looked normal on the surface, but when he tapped it with his hammer in a few spots, he noticed something off about the sound. Hollow, like there was empty space underneath. He told the foreman. The foreman said, "Break it open and take a look." So Master Zhao used an electric breaker to chisel through the concrete. At about 20 centimeters deep, he uncovered an iron cover. Square, about 80 centimeters across, made of cast iron, rusted beyond recognition. There was nothing on the cover, no handle, no markings. Just an iron plate embedded under the concrete. The foreman came over, took a look, and told someone to get a crowbar. Several people worked together to pry the iron cover open. A smell, Master Zhao later described it to Old Sun as indescribable. It wasn't the stench of rot. It was a heavy, stifling smell, like something sealed for decades suddenly being opened, a smell of rust and dirt and some kind of sourness you couldn't name. Below was a hole, pitch black, with no visible bottom. There were stairs, an iron spiral staircase, badly rusted, and nobody was sure if they could hold a person's weight. The foreman shone his flashlight down and said, "Seems pretty deep." He aimed the light down for a while, then suddenly pulled it back. The people beside him asked what he'd seen. He said, "Nothing. Just some iron racks on the first basement level. Empty." But according to people who were there, the foreman's face was white. He was normally a fearless guy, but that day, when they opened the iron cover, his expression changed. Later, the foreman told the crew to leave the hole alone for now, seal it back up and wait for higher-ups to deal with it. The iron cover was put back in place, and another layer of concrete was poured over it. A few days later, the crew got word they didn't need to touch the east corridor floor anymore. Just keep the original state.
After a few drinks one time, Master Xiao said something to Old Sun. That day when the foreman shone his light down, I was standing right next to him. What I saw wasn't iron racks. I saw several white human-shaped figures standing in the corner of that basement, facing the wall, not moving.
Old Sun asked Master Xiao, "Could you have been mistaken? A trick of the light?"
Master Xiao said, "I saw it very clearly. An iron rack and a human body, I can tell the difference." Master Xiao said those human-shaped figures were standing very neatly, lined up against the wall, like they were queued up there. He counted about 5 or 6 of them. They were all facing the wall, their backs to the stairway entrance. When the flashlight beam hit them, those silhouettes didn't move. No reaction at all.
And he said the color of those human silhouettes wasn't pure white. It was a kind of grayish white, with a faint fluorescent sheen. Not the color of light reflecting off clothes, it was the color of skin. But a terrifying kind of white, like something that had been soaking in water for a very long time.
Master Xiao said he never mentioned it again after that. The crew shifted to another area and put up barriers around the east corridor. Later he heard that people from higher up had pried open the iron cover and gone down to look. But what they actually saw, nobody knows.
Part 6, Background on Unit 731. At this point, I think it's necessary to provide some background. Because Unit 731 wasn't just another Japanese occupation-era barracks or military factory. It was the largest and most systematic biological weapons research institution in human history. In 1932, Japanese Army surgeon Shiro Ishii established the first experimental base in Baying, behind Harbin. In 1936, the Guangdong Army moved the base to Pingfang district on the southern outskirts of Harbin, officially naming it the Guangdong Army Epidemic Prevention and Water Supply Department, with the cover name Manchuria Unit 731. The name was clever. Epidemic Prevention and Water Supply sounds like a sanitation unit. In reality, the unit's core mission was researching how to kill more people with bacteria and viruses. Unit 731 occupied 6 square kilometers. It had the headquarters building, prison facilities, laboratories, dissection rooms, crematoriums, animal breeding areas, an airstrip, a power plant, and a dedicated railway line. It was a fully industrialized murder factory. At its peak, the unit had over 3,000 personnel, including military doctors, technicians, researchers, and administrative staff. Among them were some of Japan's top medical experts at the time. Their research topics included plague, anthrax, cholera, typhoid, frostbite, altitude decompression sickness, and poison gas, all based on experiments conducted on live human subjects. Where did the experimental subjects come from? Resistance fighters captured from across China, and ordinary civilians. The Japanese called these people Maryuta, meaning logs. Not human beings. Logs. After the experiments, they were disposed of like waste. In August 1945, just before Japan's surrender, Unit 731 destroyed most of its facilities to eliminate evidence. Important documents were taken back to Japan. Researchers were evacuated. But for the experimental subjects still locked in the underground prison who hadn't yet been processed, the Japanese army took the most brutal approach. They blew up the underground passages, sealed the ventilation shafts, and turned the entire underground space into a sealed tomb. How many people were trapped underground at that time? No records exist. Most of Unit 731's archives were burned before the evacuation, and the remainder were handed over to the United States. in exchange for immunity from war crimes prosecution for Shiro Ishii and all Unit 731 personnel. It was the darkest deal in human history. Part 7, Xiao Liu's friend Old Ma. Back to Xiao Liu's story. After hearing from Old Sun about Master Zhao's experience, Xiao Liu found it even harder to sleep. He told me that night he went home, tossed and turned in bed, his mind full of those white human-shaped silhouettes Master Zhao had described. He said he didn't normally believe in ghosts, but Master Zhao's description was too specific, 5 or 6 of them, facing the wall, grayish-white, standing in neat formation. That's not something a drunk man could just make up. The next morning, Xiao Liu made another call. This time it was to a friend of his in Harbin, a man named Ma, the same old Ma mentioned in the earlier Old Yang Tells Ghost Stories episode about the cat-faced old lady, a local expert who knew Harbin's old buildings and folk legends inside and out.
Xiao Liu asked him, "Old Ma, have you ever heard about what's under Unit 731?
Old Ma was silent for a moment. Then he said, "Why are you asking about that?"
Xiao Liu said, "I ran into something strange. I want to ask about it." Old Ma said, "You free tonight? Come over to my place. Let's talk in person."
That evening, Xiao Liu went to Old Ma's place. Old Ma lived in Daowai district, in an old-style residential building. On the wall of his living room hung an old map of Harbin with many spots circled in red pen. Xiao Liu noticed that Pingfang district was circled twice, heavily, in red. Old Ma poured him a drink and said, "I've heard about what's under Unit 731 too. Not just heard, I saw it with my own eyes 20 years ago." Xiao Liu was startled. "You've seen it?"
Old Ma said, "In 1999, I worked security in Pingfang for 6 months. Not security for the memorial hall, for the perimeter of the site. The memorial hall had just opened, and a lot of areas were still under renovation. Our night patrols didn't include the headquarters building that was off limits, with its own guards. But on night shifts, you get bored. Sometimes you wander around."
He said one time, a fall, around 2 in the morning, he walked over to the east side of the headquarters building, near that corridor you mentioned. He saw light coming from the window at the end of the corridor. Not electric light. It was a very dim, greenish-white light, flickering on and off, like someone was waving a flashlight back and forth inside the corridor. But he knew the building had no power at night, the main breaker was pulled before everyone left. He said he stood outside for about 10 minutes, and the light never went out. He wanted to get closer for a better look. But when he got within about 20 meters of the window, he suddenly felt something was wrong, not visually, but in a felt sense. He described it as something pressing against his chest, preventing him from going further. He couldn't explain it. Like an invisible wall, a pressure differential, or something even stranger. He didn't go any further. He stood there and watched as the light slowly faded, as if something had walked away. Later he asked people on other shifts about it. Some said they'd seen the light too. Some said they never had. But one old security guard who'd been there for 3 years told him it wasn't anything strange, it was them taking a breath of air. Old Ma asked who them was. The old security guard just looked at him and didn't answer. Part 8, The Sato Family's Secret. The next day's itinerary should have been the end of it. The Sato family had an afternoon flight back to Dalian. But that morning, when Xiao Liu went to pick them up at the hotel, he noticed the old man wasn't in the lobby. Mr. Sato was sitting alone on the couch waiting for him. He looked exhausted, like he hadn't slept well.
He said, "Guide Liu, my father would like to see you again."
Xiao Liu followed him upstairs to the room. The old man was wearing his gray trench coat, sitting by the window. Outside was a gray morning. The Songhua River glimmered white in the distance. On the tea table were 2 cups, 1 tea, 1 water.
Mr. Sato translated. The old man began to speak.
He said his father's name was Sato Ichiro, and he was 76 years old. When Japan surrendered in 1945, he was 4. His father, the old man's grandfather, was a researcher at Unit 731. A medical doctor, specializing in frostbite and the effects of low temperatures on human tissue. Back then, Unit 731 had a massive supply of so-called experimental materials, Chinese, as well as Soviets, Mongolians, and Koreans. They were held in the prison on the west side of the headquarters building in Pingfang, numbered, registered, then sent in batches to the laboratories of various research departments. After the experiments, the bodies were handled by designated personnel in the crematorium out back. He said that in August 1945, before the Japanese withdrawal, Unit 731 blew up most of its facilities. But the underground portion of the headquarters building was too large to completely destroy in time. The Japanese used explosives to collapse the stairways leading to the second and third basement levels in 2 places and sealed several entrances with concrete. Some of the Japanese soldiers who participated in the sealing were captured by the Soviet Red Army after the war and sent to Siberian labor camps. They never came back. His father, Dr. Sato, was one of the few who successfully evacuated before the Soviets arrived. He disguised himself as an ordinary military doctor, retreated south with the withdrawing Japanese forces, and was eventually taken in by the Kuomintang Army in Changchun. In 1946, he left Changchun and returned to Japan. He took 2 things with him, a summary of Unit 731's research notes, and a key. That key, the old man said, he'd seen at home as a child. A black iron key, about a dozen centimeters long, very heavy, engraved with a serial number. He asked his father what the key was for. His father said it was the key to the second basement level of the Unit 731 headquarters building. Part 9. What the old man finally said. The old man said his father died in 1998. Stomach cancer. On his deathbed, his consciousness came and went. Sometimes he didn't recognize people. Sometimes he suddenly became lucid and talked about the past. On the last clear night, he called his son to his bedside and told him something. August 1945. The final days before the Japanese withdrawal. Unit 731 received orders to destroy all evidence before the Soviet Red Army arrived. Documents burned. Equipment dismantled. Buildings demolished. Experimental subjects disposed of. Everything was chaos. His father was assigned to oversee the sealing of the headquarters building's underground facilities. In the stairwell, he encountered a Chinese man. A young Chinese man, wearing a prison uniform stained beyond recognition. There were still handcuffs on his wrists. Somehow he had escaped from the cells. When that young man saw him, he didn't run. He stood there, trembling all over, looking at Dr. Sato. In broken Japanese, he said one thing, "Please kill me." Dr. Sato said nothing.
The young man said it again. "Please kill me. Don't bury me alive."
Just then, the sound of Japanese soldiers' footsteps and shouts came from the other end of the corridor. When the young man heard those sounds, his body trembled even harder. He didn't wait for Dr. Sato to respond. He suddenly turned and ran down into the third basement level, which hadn't been completely demolished yet. Dr. Sato stood at the top of the stairs, the beam of his flashlight following the young man's limping figure as he ran downward. He heard the footsteps fade, and then silence. The Japanese soldiers ran up and asked where the man had gone. Dr. Sato said he ran downstairs. The soldiers looked down into the darkness. They shouted a few times. No response. They didn't dare go down. So they closed the iron door at the top of the stairs and locked it from the outside. The key to that lock was the one the old man had seen as a child. When they evacuated later, Dr. Sato took that key with him. Why he took it, even he couldn't say. Maybe to keep as a memento. Maybe to remember that young man's last words, "Please kill me. Don't bury me alive." He took the key away with him. But the darkness of that basement swallowed the rest of his life. Part 10, The Key. At this point, the old man stopped.
The room was quiet for a while. Xiao Liu said he could hear the occasional sound of footsteps passing in the hallway, and the wind whistling over the Songhua River in the distance.
The old man reached into the inside pocket of his trench coat and pulled something out. It was wrapped in a piece of dark blue cloth, carefully wrapped. He opened it layer by layer. What was finally revealed was a black iron key.
Xiao Liu said by that point he didn't even know what to say. He looked at the key, about a dozen centimeters long, very old. The surface had a layer of dark red rust, but the craftsmanship was solid. And yes, there was a serial number engraved on it, though it was already somewhat worn.
The old man placed the key on the tea table and pushed it toward him. Xiao Liu was taken aback. "Uncle, this is?"
The old man said something. Mr. Sato translated. "My father asked me to bring this key back."
The old man said a few more things. Mr. Sato's expression grew complicated. He paused before translating. "I've fulfilled my father's dying wish. But I have one more request. Would you accompany me there one more time? I want to find that stairwell entrance and return this key to where it belongs." Part 11, Going Back.
Xiao Liu said his mind wrestled with it for about 3 seconds. Then he agreed.
He said he wasn't sure why he agreed. Maybe it was because the old man had been perfectly calm from the moment he walked in, but when he said "return the key to where it belongs," his voice trembled. A 76-year-old Japanese man, spanning 74 years, flying from Japan to Dalian, then from Dalian to Harbin, all to put a key back at the entrance of a basement.
Xiao Liu said he couldn't think of a reason to refuse.
He called someone he knew who worked at the memorial hall, a man named Wang, the deputy chief of the security department. Xiao Liu gave him a rough idea of the situation. He didn't mention the key, of course. He just said there was an elderly Japanese expert who wanted to revisit the site and look at the architectural details of the old building. Chief Wang hesitated for a moment, then said, "It's Monday today, the memorial hall is closed to visitors." "That works. But don't wander around on your own. I'll take you in." That afternoon, the three of them, Xiao Liu, Mr. Sato, and the old Mr. Sato, went back to Pingfang. This time they entered the headquarters building directly through the staff passage. Chief Wang led the way, Xiao Liu followed behind, and the old man walked at the back. The lights in the corridor were off. Only the beam of Chief Wang's flashlight lit their way. April afternoon, overcast outside. Inside the building was even darker than outside. The air was cold, with an indescribable smell, old plaster, rust, dust, and something deeper, something that couldn't be named. The old man walked very slowly. Every step was certain. He didn't need directions. It was as if every corridor, every turn in this building had already been etched into his memory. They reached the east corridor. Chief Wang turned on the lights. The white wall was still there, as white as the day before. The old man walked straight up to it and stopped. He pointed to a spot, lower than where he'd touched the day before, about 40 centimeters from the floor. He said something.
Mr. Sato translated. He says there used to be a ventilation opening here. When it was opened, you could lower a rope down to the second basement level. On the second basement level, there was a passage leading to the electrical room of the main laboratory. Chief Wang's expression was complicated. He looked at the wall, then at the old man. "I've worked here for 6 years," he said. I've never heard of a ventilation opening here.
The old man didn't argue. He just stood there, hand against the wall, looking down at the floor. After a moment, he crouched down and knocked on the floor with his knuckles. Knock, knock, knock. Knock, knock. Chief Wang didn't say anything. Part 12, The Gap in the Floor. After knocking, the old man stood up, brushed the dust off his hands, and said a few words to Mr. Sato. The gist of Mr. Sato's translation was this: the underground area had been modified. Some of the structure was different from back then. The notes his father left behind included a hand-drawn pipe diagram with several positions marked. The section of floor he had just knocked on matched the pipe routing in the diagram. But the ventilation opening marked on the diagram had been filled in with cement.
Chief Wang listened with a deepening frown. He crouched down and felt the spot the old man had knocked on. Concrete floor. No different from anywhere else. No visible difference at all. He thought for a long moment, then said, "I'll have to report this up the chain."
Xiao Liu said the response Chief Wang got was they were told not to investigate any further. The official reason was that the site structures were over 70 years old, the underground layout was complex and unstable, and exploratory excavation was not recommended. Additionally, this involved a sensitive area and foreign nationals, so proper procedures had to be followed. Xiao Liu said he completely understood that response. After all, it was the Unit 731 site. The history involved was too complicated. And the old man being Japanese, that was indeed sensitive. He could understand the memorial hall's caution.
But there was one thing he could never figure out. Part 13, What Xiao Liu Couldn't Figure Out. Xiao Liu saw the Sato family off. The key, the old man neither left it with him nor took it back with him. At Harbin Taiping International Airport, in the departure lounge, the old man took the key out of its cloth wrapper, looked at it, and then handed it to his son, Mr. Sato. He whispered something in his son's ear, then turned and walked toward the security checkpoint. Mr. Sato stood there holding the key, stunned for a moment. Then he walked up to Xiao Liu and held the key out to him.
He said, "My father says this key should stay here. If you have a chance, help us put it back."
Xiao Liu said he thought about it, but didn't take it. He said, "Uncle, this key shouldn't be in my hands. It's your family's thing. However you want to handle it, you decide."
Mr. Sato was silent for a moment. He put the key away. Then he shook Xiao Liu's hand and said two things. The first was "thank you." The second was, "My father says there are still many things in the second basement level that haven't come out."
He turned and caught up with his group.
Xiao Liu stood in the airport terminal, watching them walk into the security channel. The old man was in line. He didn't look back. Xiao Liu said at that moment he suddenly realized something when the old man said, "many things that haven't come out." The word he used wasn't things. Mr. Sato had translated it as things, but the original Japanese word the old man used was monetachi. That word can mean either objects or people.
Part 14, What Happened Later.
Xiao Liu said that for the better part of a year after it happened, occasionally in the middle of the night, he'd find himself thinking about the old man's hand running back and forth across that wall, about the white human silhouettes Master Zhao had described that old son passed on to him, about the foreman's pale face, about the green light in the window old Ma had seen.
He said one night, already lying in bed, a detail suddenly struck him. The old man said his father had run away with the key. But back then, his father was in charge of sealing the underground facilities. He must have had more than one key. One key for every door. Dr. Sato took one of them. So what about the other keys? When Unit 731 surrendered, so much equipment, documents, medicine, poison gas, it was all dealt with. But what about the keys? The keys to the doors locking the second and third basement levels, were they all destroyed together? Scattered in different people's hands? Or, were some doors simply never opened again, from August 1945 onwards?
Xiao Liu said he didn't know. And he didn't want to know.
He said he later did some research. The Unit 731 site opened to the public starting in 1985, and has since undergone multiple rounds of renovation and construction. But according to publicly available information and construction records from back then, the main building of the headquarters was only renovated above ground and on the first basement level. The second basement level and below, the descriptions were vague. Some said not open to the public due to structural hazards. Some said the underground portion has been fully sealed. Some didn't mention it at all. No one knows exactly where the stairs behind that white wall lead. No one knows how large the space under that iron cover is, or what it connects to.
But Xiao Liu said that once, when he was drinking at a friend's place, after about half a gin of baijiu, his tongue loosened up and he told the story. His friend listened, thought for a long time, then said,
"Tell me, do the people in that second basement level know that 74 years have passed up above?" Xiao Liu didn't answer. His friend went on, "That old Japanese man might not have been talking about the key."
Xiao Liu asked what he meant.
His friend said, "When he said there are still many things that haven't come out, maybe he wasn't talking about things from before. Maybe he was talking about the things that have been down there all along."
Xiao Liu said he couldn't sleep that night.
He searched online for a lot of material about the Unit 731 underground. Some people said that in the 1950s, the Soviet Union had transferred a batch of Unit 731 documents to China, including a copy of an underground facility floor plan. On that plan, 2 locations had been specially marked, not laboratories, not prison cells, but connecting passages between 2 areas. The annotation on the plan was in Japanese. Translated, it read, "Do not open." No one knows what those 4 words meant. Did they mean the passage had been destroyed and couldn't be opened? Or did they mean, once opened, something that shouldn't be seen would come out?
Xiao Liu said he also found a forum post, supposedly written by someone who had worked as a night security guard at the Unit 731 site. The post said that during one of his night shifts, he heard a sound coming from the direction of the headquarters building. Not footsteps. Not voices. It was a tapping sound. A very rhythmic tapping, coming from underground. 1 tap, 2 taps, 3 taps. A pause. Then 3 more taps.
He said the sound lasted about 5 minutes, then stopped. The next day he asked the day shift colleague about it. The colleague said that area had been sealed off long ago. No one could be down there. He said he knew that. But the rhythm of those taps stayed with him for many years. It was Morse code. 3 short, 3 long, 3 short, the International Distress Signal, SOS. Part 15, Aftermath. After Xiao Liu finished telling me this story, we were both silent for a long time. The food on the table had gone cold. The liquor was finished. Later I asked him a few questions. He didn't want to answer, but in the end he did. I asked him what happened to the old man.
Xiao Liu said he called Mr. Sato once after that. It was about 3 months after the old man had returned to Japan. On the phone, Mr. Sato said his father's health had been poor since coming home. Those few days at the Unit 731 site had used up nearly all his strength. He said his father would often wake up in the middle of the night, sit on the edge of his bed in a daze, muttering a word over and over. Mr. Sato couldn't understand what the word was. The pronunciation was very indistinct, like some dialect of Japanese, or maybe some other language entirely.
Then one day, the old man suddenly improved. He was in good spirits at breakfast. He talked to his son about a lot of things, about the streets of Harbin, about the ice on the Songhua River, about the smell of the bakery on Central Street. He said he wanted to go back to Harbin one more time. to see that city again. He said it was very beautiful there. That afternoon, the old man passed away in his sleep. Sudden cardiac arrest. The doctor said he felt no pain. When Mr. Sato was going through his father's belongings, he found the key in the drawer of his desk. It was still in that dark blue cloth wrapper, carefully wrapped. His father hadn't returned it to the entrance of that basement. In the end, he still couldn't let it go. Or rather, what he couldn't let go wasn't the key itself. It was the image behind the key, that young man limping down into the darkness.
Mr. Sato asked my friend Xiao Liu. The key is with me now. Would you like to take it and put it where it belongs?
Xiao Liu thought for a long time. Then he said, Uncle, I think your father already put the key back. He put it back into that building. He put it back into that corridor. He put it back into that afternoon in 1945. What remains is no longer something a key can solve.
Mr. Sato was silent on the other end of the line for a long time. Then he said, Thank you.
Xiao Liu said that after that, he never took another Japanese tour group again.
I asked him why. He said, it's not hatred. It's a feeling I can't explain. After the Unit 731 thing, every time I saw Japanese tourists visiting the Unit 731 site, whether they were looking seriously, keeping their heads down, or walking out in tears, I couldn't help wondering, were there fathers or grandfathers in that building back then?
Xiao Liu said, I know that's not fair. Not every Japanese person was Unit 731. But I couldn't stop myself.
He later transferred out of his guide position at the tour company. Now he works in administration. He doesn't lead tours anymore. I said, do you think the key the old man brought was real?
Xiao Liu said, I looked it up later. The architectural blueprints of the Unit 731 headquarters building are archived at the National Archives of Japan. There really is a stairwell under the East Corridor, exactly where the old man said it would be.
I said, what about those white silhouettes? Xiao Liu took a sip of his drink and said, after Master Zhao retired, he and Old Sun became drinking buddies. Old Sun said Master Zhao insisted until his dying day that he hadn't been mistaken. But in his final years, he changed what he said. He said they weren't ghosts. They were people. People who had been sealed underground, who lived until their final moment, leaving behind the silhouette of their standing forms on that floor. I said, so what were they, really?
Xiao Liu said, I don't know. I've always felt that what the old man meant by there are still many things that haven't come out, maybe it wasn't ghosts, and it wasn't bodies either. Maybe it was the truth. Part of the truth about Unit 731 is permanently sealed behind that white wall. The key is right in front of all of us.
But what can a key open? I think about this question a lot. If one day that iron cover is pried open again, those white walls torn down, and that second basement level sees sunlight again, what will we find? Bones, archives, experimental equipment? Or something else? Behind those passages marked "Do not open," what is really locked away? I think back to Xiao Liu's words, repeated over and over, in northeast China's winter, the ground freezes harder than iron. But some things are harder than frozen earth. Even 74 years can't thaw them. They stand there behind that white wall, in the darkness of the second basement level, facing the wall, never turning around, never speaking. Waiting for the day someone opens that door. Maybe that day will never come. Maybe that day is closer than anyone thinks. End. If you enjoyed this story, please like and subscribe. New urban legend every day.